Strengthen your understanding of governance and policy design. The 12-week graduate course in public policy begins 10th January 2026. Apply by 30th November 2025 to avail a 10% early bird scholarship.
Welcome to All Things Policy, a daily podcast by the Takshashila Institution. We are a bunch of policy nerds based in Bengaluru, and we like bringing fresh perspectives to Indian affairs and Indian perspectives to global affairs. So grab a cup of coffee, sit back, and join us for today's chat.
Hi, and welcome to another episode of All Things Policy. My name is Malti Ranati, and I head the policy school at the Takshashila Institution. And today I have a special guest. Her name is Dr. Chaitanya Sridhar. And we'll be talking about human and elephant encounters and how we can coexist. Dr. Chaitanya is a multifaceted individual. She has an expertise in both sports and ecology. She's an award-winning sports and depth psychologist, a TEDx speaker, and is very passionate about elephant conservation. She holds a PhD from the University of Australia, has spent over 20 years mentoring elite athletes, shaping the future of mental resilience in sports. In fact, she made history as the first woman sports psychologist in the IPL and has worked with Olympic medalists and top athletes. But that's not the reason I requested her to be part of this podcast. It was because of her other deep insights that I wanted her to be here. Beyond the sports arena, her work in animal rehabilitation and trans-species psychology is redefining how we understand emotional and cognitive connections across species. And as the founder of ANE expands to all about the nature of elephants. ANE also means elephant in Kannada. So with ANE, she's been championing the conservation and well-being of captive elephants. And that's what I think ANE has been, was founded back in 2022.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
So welcome, Chaitanya.
Thank you so much, Malti. Really happy to be here and also to be talking about something that I'm passionate and I know you're equally passionate about, elephants. So
Absolutely.
Excited and really hope the message spreads. Thank you for having me here.
Thank you, Chaitanya. In fact, I missed mentioning, I think 2025 has been a big year for Chaitanya. She's authored not just one, but two books this year. The first one is called Elephant Wings to Freedom. And this blends depth psychology, ecology, and spirituality into a powerful tribute to nature. That was her first book. And very soon, right after, she she co-authored it, in fact, with Kirtana Swaminathan. But this was a book called Minds in Motion, the catalyst role of sports psychologists. So it's been a really busy year, and I was lucky to kind of get the time
Yes.
towards the fag end of the year. So thank you, Chaitanya.
Quite a year. Thank you. Yeah.
Yeah, so a quick introduction about what we're going to be discussing before I ask Chaitanya to share her inputs. So, as we all know, India is the seventh largest country in the world with respect to land mass. It is also one of the most biodiverse regions. It contains 4 of the world's 36 biodiversity hotspots. It's also home to animals ranging from the Bengal tiger to the great Indian rhinoceros. And animal protection and welfare in the country has sort of taken a prominent position over the recent years. The protection of animals, and for that matter, flora and fauna, is enshrined as a fundamental duty in the Indian Constitution. And there exist several animal welfare legislations in India, such as the Prevention of Cruelty to Animals Act in 1960 and the Wildlife Protection Act 1972. This is at the union level, and we have multiple state level policies. Right? So our topic today is observing the anthropology of animals, which is the interdisciplinary field that studies human-animal relationships. So we'll look at it from the lens of the government in terms of the policies that are there, and the markets, which is in terms of how it has been commercialized in a certain way, and finally at the society's role and where it has to kind of step up. So human animal studies kind of moves beyond treating animals as just mere objects or resources, but examining their role in human culture, kinship, symbolism, and social life as well. So I'd like to ask you, Doctor, how was your journey? Like you founded ANE, but what kind of prompted you to begin this journey?
I have to start with something that might seem a little outlandish, that both, in fact, elephants and sports psychology chose me. It wasn't the other way around. And I've been very passionate, Malvi, about elephants, about, my background is from Malnad as well, which is, the Western Ghats. And I think our childhood does influence. We will touch on it at a later point, maybe when we talk about society. Um, so when I was first called into the space, right, the elephant space, and I saw what was happening, right? Like, we're all in awe. We're all in awe. It's the largest land mammal. Even now, when I see them on an everyday level as well, I'm still, there is a lot of awe and curiosity. But when I entered this space, when elephants and my world became intertwined, I also started realizing that, including me, so called animal lover, elephant lover, did not know what is actually happening to the species. Right? It's a heritage species, it's a Schedule 1 species, it is given the maximum protection, or at least the policy says so. But then, beyond that, what is really happening to the species? We anthropomorphize everything. We see everything from a human centric perspective. So, and that's, I think, one of the first harsh realities which hit me when I came into this space. And I started seeing what we as humans, right, knowingly, unknowingly, have done, have used, misused them. And from that space was when I felt I have to get the message across, because conservationists are doing a brilliant job, be it the forest department, be it, welfare individuals. But there's also so much that the majority of the, especially urban population, doesn't know, right? When people hear that I'm involved with elephants, I prefer to use the word involved than work, because I think it works both ways. They work on me as much as I'm working on them. And the first thing people say is, "Oh, I'd gone." Thankfully, not so much in India now, but they'll show their phone, and then they'll say, "Oh, I bathed this elephant. I took a photo here. I've gone on an elephant ride." And I kind of like now just go, that's really, really difficult. So when I started getting into this space and understanding, one of the first things I started realizing was we need to get to know, when I say we, the society at large, to know with what really is an elephant. Beyond our human perspective, beyond the fact that, yes, I love this majestic being, what's an elephant? What's the nature of an elephant? What would it want? Where is it supposed to be? What happens when it's in captivity? When I mean captivity, I'm also spelling it out because I just recently took a conservation psychology course. So people think only if an elephant is chained, only if it is in a zoo or such a place, it's captive. Whereas if it's in someone's house, it's in private ownership, they feel it's not captive. So I think to understand that, where is the elephant supposed to be? What is the natural behavior? What happens when their corridors are blocked? When their habitats are fragmented? What happens when they enter, like what we so often hear now, conflict? Where is the conflict coming? So I would share with people, I would share with my close folks, my friends, and and then also trans-species psychology, like being a depth psychologist, I think that's where my expertise came in. I started realizing that the elephants who were in the sanctuary started calming down, and that's how we formed ANE. I mean, just to give the background of it.
Mm. And it's in 2022. This was during
Yes,
the pandemic time or right
yes,
after?
pandemic was just about kind of, we were emerging out of the pandemic. But I think also what you brought in, because during the pandemic, the wild elephants at least thrived, or the wild in general thrived, but the captive elephants really suffered, because it takes around at least 1 lakh a month to look after an elephant. And there were people begging for, to send fodder. They were, requesting help, because all sources of income, which is through begging, through entertainment, had stopped during COVID. So I think that's where it started. And one of the things in particular is that what we were looking to really include is the youth, because they are our future generation. They are the future conservationists. And that has been the approach of Ane, one of the primary, and then to, start instilling more empathic methods in especially captive elephant welfare and management. With that, and even if you look at a captured elephant, the way it is broken, and then so it is settled. But if it can be the other way around, bring in empathic methods, you settle it in, there's already a connection formed. Whereas when you break it, you're using control. And that's where you see so much, mayhem going. People will say, how did the elephant end up killing its mahout? Why did it attack its mahout? So, I feel, me being a depth psychologist, the psychology part primarily really influenced. Yeah, wanted to start with that. Yeah.
Right. No, thanks, Chaitanya. I think you touched upon a whole range of different aspects, and this is from the Samaj, Sarkar, and Bazaar. And just for our listeners as well, right? Some elephant facts which will be useful for us all to know, because we're talking about the human elephant encounters and the conflicts, right? But elephants being the largest land animals, right? As you mentioned, also they're herbivores, which means they also kind of consume per day. That's around 150. An adult Asian elephant consumes from 150 to 300 kgs of vegetation daily, right?
Yes.
Which means they need to forage for that much in the wild, and in captivity, then they need to be,
fed, provided, which doesn't happen.
Very
Right?
expensive, right? So largely we have three species of elephants. We have broadly African and Asian, but actually in African we have the African savanna, which is the bush elephant, and then we have the African forest elephant, and of course the Asian elephant, right? So there's a large difference between the Asian and the African. The Asian is much smaller. The ear shape is different. The trunk, interestingly, has only one finger in the Asian, whereas it has two in the African.
Yes.
And then, of course, there are differences in the head, the back, the toes. Also,
Height.
the height as well.
height.
Yeah, Asian is smaller of the two.
Yeah.
Having lived in Zambia, I mean, my childhood was in Zambia, right? I've seen the African elephant up front and up close, right? And they're majestic creatures, as in they're just a sight to behold, and a lot of respect for them as well. And interestingly, right, is that only the male Asian grow tusks, larger tusks. The females have a smaller, it's
Yes,
called tush, right?
Yes,
Smaller, it's not very visible. Whereas the African, both male and female, typically have tusks, and these are huge, right?
Yes.
And that's one of the reasons also why around 90% of African elephants have been wiped out in the past century.
Yes.
I remember when I was in Zambia, right? Ivory used to be sold at our doorsteps.
Oh
we used to have people coming home and saying, we're having, and these are huge tusks, right? And they're all kind of ornamental things were made out of those.
Yes.
And so largely due to the ivory trade, apparently 90% of the African elephants are wiped out, and only 415,000 wild elephants are alive. And in India, the population recent count is around 22,000.
Yes.
146.
Yeah, it's come
Right?
down. Yeah, it's
Come down further.
Yeah.
And I think predominantly Karnataka, Assam, and Tamil Nadu constitute 60% of that population.
Karnataka's got the largest number of.
Larger. Okay.
I hope we can still say that we have the largest and they're more in the wild. Let's see how it goes. Yeah.
Right. But the numbers have dwindled drastically, right? Leaving them an endangered or vulnerable species, right?
It's on the IUCN Red List. It's the endangered species, and it would, right, Malti, like if I think I'm not sure which bracket to put it under, but the point is, if as humans we are expanding to this extent so drastically, right? That our habitats, wildlife habitats, are shrinking. It's bound to be, like what you were saying, conflict, or what we call, sometimes people prefer to use in the word conservation word, negative interaction. But you are come, right? Like, and from their ancient memory, they're still going to traverse those paths.
Those elephant corridors, right?
Exactly.
With the migration paths that they take. Yeah.
One of the questions I like to pose when I give talks is, I'm like, if someone enters your house unwillingly, right, would you be okay? And most people are very, stunned. But that's exactly what's happening to them, right? Like, we're taking away their homes. You can't say stay in this whatever patch which is fragmented. And like you were just citing, the numbers with their act, and they're meant to be moving creatures. To add to some of what you were saying, they're the ecosystem engineers, right? There's a very beautiful proverb which is like, where the elephant walks, the forest remembers. Other species grow, thrive because of them. We ourselves need them, like even, they're very good with like carbon emission, right? So I think one of the primary factors, and Malti, this is where I actually was, even when I was kind of just pondering on our podcast, I was kind of going, it really also comes down so much to eco-psychology, our relation with the natural world, ecology. I think psychology comes in more because I'm predominantly a psychologist, but we all know baby Bani, right? Like the calf who got hit early to 24 in Jan. This was this young calf who got hit on a railway track in Uttarakhand, and like, hips, spine, all affected, like her legs, and like everyone was, is she going to survive? And she has to stand. The calf has to stand. Because if not, the elephant can't take, their body weight is too much even for a calf, right? And what happens when our progress it is done in, without keeping the ecology in mind, right? Because that's the pathway they're using. And the number of elephants we lose due to railway tracks. Of course, they're using AI, you using over bridges, under bridges. But the fact is, what's our connection to myself, to the natural world, to other?
Yeah, I think each state has kind of handled this in different ways. They've intervened in different ways, right? Like in Kerala, I think, of course, apart from ensuring that they have early warning systems in place, I think they have even things like food and fodder management missions that they have.
Yeah, so the early warning systems, yes, of course, that's being done by like most states. Tamil Nadu in particular has used AI, which has cut down quite a bit of the railway deaths.
Even drones, Karnataka, we've used drones as well.
Yes, Karnataka, and also the Valparai region. Like, it was one of the major conflicts, but like they brought in the community,
Right.
worked with the community and early warning system, because that's most of the encounters are happening then. Like, elephants come in at night and go back in the morning. They avoid humans, We are, but Malti, the point is, like now there's a lot of insight coming in, awareness coming in, and rites to passage. So they're trying to like retrace, recreate, and reconnect the corridors, right?
Right.
I have to mention Bannerghatta here. When you hear Bannerghatta, right, most people will talk about the zoo. How many of us know that it's a major national corridor?
Right.
24th, they were planning a highway there. And, environmentalists, conservationists were like, no, I mean, that's going to lead to
It'll
so
destroy that. Yes.
because there's
And,
quite a bit, right?
right, right. And usually they travel in herds, right? They live in a more matriarchal kind of
Exactly.
herd of 6 to 12 individuals, roughly.
Yeah.
So the herd comprises of different age.
Depends, right? Like a small herd, medium sized, big herd. And the female are meant to live, I mean, they live together for their entire life. Unless, of course, especially when captivity. And I think that's a really good point that you brought out that, and I'd like to mention this is one of the first elephants that I met as well. So, she was born free. I mean, she was a wild elephant who was illegally captured, used for logging, then hurt her leg. They then made her into an institutional temple elephant. Then, it's gotten worse. Then she's become a begging elephant, and then they've just discarded her. When and it was so sad. Like she had 10 years of freedom, but all you could do was manage her, maintain her, because it was too broken. But honestly, she's one of the sweetest souls I've met. It was so heartbreaking to see, especially the end. She would actually put her weight on her trunk because her legs had gone so bad. This is some of the issues that happen in captivity.
Right. I think in captivity, there's a bunch of things, right? That they suffer chronic physical and psychological
Yes,
problems as well,
yes,
from the
yes.
musculoskeletal and the foot, problems, like you
Foot,
mentioned,
yes,
because
foot becomes, because they're not, see,
they
they're meant to stay, land on, softer padding, right?
and
Like,
walk long distances, right? Yeah.
yes, yeah, and not like you look at any captive elephant, when they're within, let's say, with humans,
Hmm.
we are on concrete paths. That's
Right.
it all made. And in fact, whom I call my little one, the first time I saw her, she's in this shed. I literally had to say, "Are you sure there's an elephant here?" And
Hmm.
this, 9 feet above, prime age, tight front and back, hard concrete, dogs, chickens, it was just so heartbreaking. And when this continues, and what happens, what is the food they give, right? Like if you go on feeding sugar and rice, then they also end up with a lot of lifestyle.
Obesity, yeah, kind of, right?
Exactly.
In their prime, they're around 30, 40 years. And to expose an animal, to that kind of, because of humans' wants and needs, right? When it comes to, in temples, in zoos, in circuses. And I think this is where I want to just bring in the bazaar's role, right? When we're looking at even sensitizing and bringing that awareness. So, can you talk about maybe something that maybe the education institutions can play a bigger role in sensitizing people? And even when you think, look at wildlife tourism, right?
Right. Oh,
It
definitely.
has a detrimental effect. The
Yes.
noise, the disrespect that people have for ecology. I mean, any insights on what can be done there?
I mean, I see. I think even if we take Bandipur, right, and we know that I remember earlier the night ban was around 7 p.m. if I'm not wrong. Now it's the night ban is from 9 p.m. to 6 p.m. Right, and even with that, like a lot of vested parties want that lifted. Why? For economic reasons. But so many, wildlife deaths have come down, accidents have come down because that has been stopped, right? And now I think the forest minister, gave a statement saying, they're bringing down the safaris. And, people are so divided. But my question is, if you love something, I remember reading a quote by Rabindranath Tagore where he's like, if you love a plant or a flower, you're not going to pick it, you're going to cater to it. So if I love something, I don't need to stick on to it, right? So, like, how many times are you going on a safari and what is the need, right? Also, like, I remember even when we go, right, on experiential, trips, even just take Banargata, forget any other place, right? Not kids, adults are hooting. Like it's clearly, there's messages all over saying don't scream, respect, all that. When adults don't have that, they're passing that on to the children. There were like some lion cubs, okay, playing, and there was this gentleman who goes like, "Oh, why is it falling down?" And then they go, "Why is it sitting quiet?" Then hooting. And I have to mention, I was just marking the formative assessment. In the zoo, the tiger was making these circles, repetitive movements, okay? And I remember each of the students were like, "Ma'am, that was so disturbing." See, now this is in isolation, no? And the point is, if you want to watch, right? Like, I think that's where conservation psychology comes in. I want to learn something, maintain a healthy respect, maintain, boundaries, be quiet. If I don't sensitize myself, if I don't sensitize children around me, how is that going to come about?
Right. Yeah. I want to also just bring in the media's role here, right? So, interestingly, right, there have been documentaries, nice documentaries made around, elephants and even ivory poaching. In fact,
Yes,
I think there was TV series Poacher, which is just set in 2015. It was based on true events of ivory poaching that took place in Kerala, and
yes,
I think it was the Operation Shikar that around that time, right? And it was a nice series that they made, and you realize that behind the scenes there's so much of society's involvement, and then the nexus between the government and maybe the police, and it also comes down to the involvement of transnational crime syndicates, right,
yes.
in all of this. There was another a movie or other documentary, right? Award-winning documentary called The Elephant Whisperers. This is a short documentary shot in 2020.
That was more on the captive part. Yeah.
Yeah, and it was, I think, this was an indigenous couple in South India, which is basically in Tamil Nadu, in
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
Mudumalai Tiger Reserve. There's
Correct.
a Tepakadu elephant camp there, and how they have took care of an orphaned elephant, right? And so that also kind of made news. So media has its own way of portraying the different aspects of it, but I think what's important also is that they need to also play a more responsible role in
Yes.
not villainizing this conflict. Right? Many times in the newspaper too, we see a rogue elephant
Rogue elephant.
or
Yeah.
man-eating tiger, right? So I think
Problem animal.
exactly,
Yeah. Yeah. And you're right, because I think the media can play such an important role. And I think the narrative which has been formed currently is that I won't take the name of this individual, but it was a well-known person who it was at one of the literature festival, they were talking of tigers, and then he said, which is the most dangerous? It's elephant. And I was kind of going, what was the need for that? Now, 1,000 people hear that. They're going to go tell another 200,000 people. And this is how it builds up. And you look at captures, Malti, I want to touch upon that, right? Like when an animal, right? Like if there is tension, right? There's some negative interaction. Then there's a lot of pressure on the forest department. And then if media blows it up, right?
right,
And it sometimes gets unwanted attention, negative attention, and then they will start problematizing the animal, right? But and these captures will only lead to more captures,
right,
more problems, right? Like just because you capture and then you put them somewhere else, that's not going to happen. That's not going to work, right? And that's something we've seen time and again with n number of captures. I think that's also something to be really borne in mind. And I think one of the things I ask is, when you hear something, when you see something, kind of just go, what has happened here, right? Not just that the elephant did this. Now, if I hadn't told you this story of this incident of that elephant charging the man, the headlines can be elephant charged Bandipur visitor. What did that visitor do to charge? I'm
yeah,
not saying
provoke,
elephants are gods, but the point is they mind their own business. If we keep acting crazy, uh, and it's just heartbreaking the number of videos I see, right? Like there was this teenagers or just about 17, 18, trying to mock. There's an elephant and they're trying to tease it. And then what happens? Let's say he or she doesn't escape. Then it goes elephant killed one person. Then it becomes second person. And then what happens? This elephant, for no fault of its, is actually translocated, which then adds to a lot of other problems. Like, for example, the well-known cases of Ari Komban, actually. And I think what you also touched, I really want to touch upon is there's a lot of these folks who don't understand what a capture does. If anyone has seen what happens in the kraal, there is no way they can glamorize it. But with channels, there are social media groups, profiles which glamorize captivity and captures. Like when Arjuna, right, like one of the Dasra camp elephants died last year, it was unfortunate. I mean, it was heartbreaking. I had known that elephant in person. But what was even more heartbreaking was they're like, capture, punish the elephant, the wild one who killed. It wasn't even that he got killed.
It was in Must, actually, right? That
Yeah, they were both in Must, and of course, the younger elephant got the better. All that happened. But the point is, why are we demonizing the wild?
Right.
We have this hero worship in our country, right? We're doing that similarly for even the camp elephants. But I don't know if any of those camp elephants care about. Just because Bhima responds, maybe the Mahu taught him to turn. Not that they care about everyone, unless you formed a connection. And I think that is also, lacking big time. There's insensitivity. I think we need to sensitize our approach, wonder on what is this need. And I feel this also is where these people should not get away.
Hmm.
This is also crime at smaller levels. And if we keep letting this go, this becomes bigger because there's a lot of misconception which is getting built. And, you know, who bears the brunt are the elephants. That's the
Hmm. Right, right. So since you mentioned about the crime part, right? The other on the other side, right now that we have recently, in fact, it was announced about the I think it's called NALSA. That's the National Legal Services Authority. They've launched a scheme on access to justice for victims of the human wildlife conflict, right? So essentially, you're trying to say there's a compensation, and that even in Karnataka and other states, they have increased the compensation for any accidents or incidents involving elephants or even other animals as well, like tigers and leopards. So these things have recently been announced. Supreme Court also gave directions on human wildlife conflict as now is termed as natural disaster, and so they can get around 10 lakhs ex gratia to be issued, right? So this directly strengthens legal expectations of sort of like a uniform higher compensation for deaths from elephants. And for those who are actually living on the fringes, right, where the actual human and wildlife encounters happen because of our growing need, humans' growing need for more space, and then which means shrinking resources or limited resources. And elephants especially need large areas, for them to traverse. And with the fragmentization of this, it has kind of created these more of these encounters,
more of
right?
issues. Yeah.
But from a, I want to just kind of close this podcast possibly by asking, as individuals, right, what is your suggestion on what one can do? Because one would be like ensuring we don't glamorize, ensuring that we are not, we're also paying heed to the fact that elephants too are, or any other animal, right, or do have equal right to kind of live on this earth. It is in our constitution as well. So live and let live, respecting boundaries, those sort of things. But also, when you look at even on the religious side, we see that elephants being used in temples can now be replaced by robotic elephants.
Robotic and yeah, they're as beautiful and do a great job and spare the ones. And also the lantana elephants, right?
Mm-hmm. Lantana, yes, yes. So can you maybe as the role of society, right? If you can
Yes.
just maybe give your suggestions on what as individuals we could in society do.
Yeah, I think I really like how you brought in the robotic because I feel, something that I like to ask and emphasize and bring out is that heroes are agents of change and we can all be change makers. So how do we become change makers, Mati? That's the question, I'd like to invite even those who are going to be listening. And I think one of the first step is awareness. And, one of the first advices I was given was consistency, right? So I go to the sanctuary, which is almost close to Kolar, right? And I would drive through the crazy Kiarpuram. But why am I doing? Because I'm passionate, I'm curious. And when you know, then there comes the sacred responsibility of, in my own way, what is one small actionable I can take? Right? Whether that is right to information, whether that is putting, even Project Elephant, in fact, some of the guidelines came because there was a lot of complaints against elephant abuse, both from India and abroad. So speak up and, first awareness, get to know. Like I was such a novice. I really didn't know. And that's the same thing I'm hearing from the students or the volunteers, the team which comes in. And you go, so when you know, share and share the right, be a voice. I don't like to use the word voiceless. I say listen to what's the message and what can we do. So, do I need to take blessings all the time? Do I need to go on safaris all the time? I see an abuse or I see a video which is not true or I see information which is not correct, bring it up.
Mm-hmm.
Start small because that's where we can all become change makers. And what embrace, I feel, culture
Mm-hmm.
and the wild, especially here we're talking of elephants, can go hand in hand. It's not against each other, it's not one versus the other. And start questioning. One question is, what is the natural behavior? What would a elephant really want?
Mm-hmm.
Anytime you have any kind of interaction, whether that's in tourism, whether that's in any space that you're visiting, um, ask that. So you begin that reflection. So I really feel that's how we can be agents of change.
So well put, Chaitanya. Thank you so much. And with that, I'd like to end our podcast. I hope our listeners too have got some key takeaways from this, because I think it's important that we all, as you mentioned, right, as individuals, to reflect on the real need of some of these things, which are sometimes cultural practices that we've continued, right?
Thank you.
Thank you so much,
Thank
Chaitanya.
you so much. Thank you. And if it's sowed some seed of hope, spread it on, become champions for elephants and the wild.
Absolutely. Thanks, Chaitanya. And thanks to all our listeners. Just a quick reminder that our GCPP, our 12-week graduate certificate in public policy courses will be starting in January. The early bird deadline ends 7th of December, and the last day to apply is 4th of January.
If you liked our show, dive into Takshashila's research on technology, strategy, and economic affairs. Check us out at our Twitter handle @TakshashilaINST or our website takshashila.org.in.